One question that is often asked is the relationship between the Prime Minister and his or her Cabinet, and whether indeed the Cabinet can restrict the Prime Minister's power. It's become fashionable in recent years to talk about the presidential nature of the Prime Minister, likening British Prime Ministers to American presidents, where American presidents are of all things all-powerful and all-seeing in terms of their Cabinet. One of the theories that underpins the role of the Prime Minister and his or her Cabinet is the notion that the Prime Minister is primus inter pares, or first amongst equals. Notice that first amongst equals suggests the Prime Minister is still dependent upon the consent, if not the actual support, of the Cabinet, or significant sections of it, in order to retain his or her power. In recent years, this limit was seen in stark form when Mrs Thatcher, under fire for her policies from her party and challenged by ex-Cabinet Minister Michael Heseltine, gradually lost the support of members of her Cabinet. This realisation that they would no longer support her led to her standing down as Prime Minister in November 1990. Significant divisions in the major Cabinet that followed over Europe also saw him having to hold the ring between Eurosceptics and Europhiles in his Cabinet. Blair's Cabinet might have appeared very much in Tony's image, but his reliance upon Gordon Brown effectively saw him defer to Brown upon the whole domestic agenda, particularly on the economy. In all these cases, the truth that the Cabinet is a collective entity, or as yes Prime Minister would have it, a loose confederation of warring tribes, explains that no Prime Minister can sustain dominance over the 22 other members of Cabinet for long, and the need to balance different wings of their party and manage egos of those who at some point may become rivals to the position means that there is always a tension within the Cabinet that tends to limit or restrict the power of the Prime Minister. Since the Prime Minister only heads the government, they have to delegate responsibility to ministers to develop and execute policies. Therefore, while supportive of the reforms to the NHS, Cameron has to largely leave the implementation of legislation to Andrew Lansley. The reality of power means that huge swathes of government are not directly under the control of the PM, and as such, his or her power is naturally limited by the need to accept and rely upon others. A limit to the power of the Prime Minister can be observed by the threat or actual resignation of a minister. Under Thatcher, the resignations of Heseltine, Lawson and Howe all undermined her authority as Prime Minister. Under Blair, the resignation of Robin Cook over the war in Iraq and his explosive resignation speech did much to damage the credibility of Blair over this aspect of policy. The reality of coalition government has added new limits to the power of the Prime Minister. One regards patronage and the normal power of hiring and firing. When Chris Huhne, and indeed David Laws, were forced to resign over criminal charges made against him over his driving offences, it was left to the Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg to appoint a successor at Energy, Ed Davey, and not the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's command of the Cabinet with regards to directing policy is complicated by the realities of coalition, as thus the Queen's speech of this week will highlight, as a compromise between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives. And though the Prime Minister is still the dominant player, this restricts his room for manoeuvre, as may have been the case with Cameron not using his veto over a deal on the Eurozone.